So let's get to it. Let's jump into the tools. Again, a quick recap of our requirements for today's app. Needs to reach iOS and Android. We need to do something native, and we're going to connect to that legacy data coming out of our SQL Server database in our mobile app. So let's switch over to the Telerik platform and App Builder, where we can do a lot of today's app building. So inside of our project that we created, our Windy Data project, we have our prototypes we worked on earlier. And as you can see, with one click, I can add the various things I may need to enhance my app project, from backend services, which we're using a different project for today, as well as analytics and feedback, which we'll get to later. For now, we're going to go ahead and create our App Builder hybrid project, because today's app really doesn't need a native app, and we do want to do something native, so it can't be a web app. So hybrid is the perfect solution. And once we start a new project, we have a number of options. We can start from a template, which gives us a slightly more advanced starting point, helps us kickstart our project effort. A sample project, which is a little bit more scenario-based, a little bit more code, which we can start from and customize. We can clone a repository if we have a template out there we want to start from that's not in Telerik platform, or we can start with Screen Builder, a new visual tool that we've added on top of App Builder to really accelerate the app development process. So I'm going to choose Start with Screen Builder. And because we've already got a project with that Northwind data, I'm going to choose Add Existing Backend Services Project, and I'm going to choose Northwind Data. We'll go ahead and call this our Windy Data app and click Create Project. Since we're using Screen Builder, what the platform is going to do now is automatically scaffold my project structure, creating my build system, my folder structure, help create my view models, my application bootstrap files, all these things which would take me time as I start new projects. Screen Builder is going to handle for me automatically and put me on the rails to building a good, well-structured, maintainable app. I'm going to land inside of Screen Builder, and here you can see it's a visual environment for scaffolding quickly my application views. This is not a visual design tool designed for dragging and dropping buttons. This is about a whole new level of productivity. So as we recall from our design process, we know that one of the views we need is a data-bound list view. So I can come in here and say, change this view type. And here you can see what I mean. We're not focused on buttons and list views. We're focused on entire views of an application. And one of those conceptual views is a data list view. When I choose a view type, I get a number of properties I can configure, like the name of the view, which I'm going to go ahead and call employees, and various configuration options which have been exposed to me via this view template. I can change the icon. I can change the data binding from our data provider. And again, we want to work with the Northwind employees data type, which we've exposed. This is live data coming off of a SQL server. And because this is a data-bound list view, I need to decide how to bind my data to the UI. And so I get this great drop-down showing me all of my available fields, intelligently being pulled out of that web service, so I don't have to guess the names. So I'm going to bind my heading text to last name and my subheading text to, let's say, job title. I even have additional configuration options for the list view, whether we want to enable pull to refresh, load on demand. We'll go ahead and enable grouping. This is using a Kenda UI list view, so that's an advanced feature that's been made available. We'll go ahead and group by the country in which our Northwind employees work. When we click Apply, we're going to see a real-time interactive preview in the simulator here on the right, so that we can immediately begin interacting with and exploring our application to see if it does what we want it to do. And so here we go. Live data being pulled out of SQL Server via our backend services in the data link server. I can interact with it here. I can scroll it. I can see the data that's being bound. And if I were to stop just here for a minute and step away, this is a step in a project where if I were doing this all by hand, it would have probably taken me at least an hour or more to get everything set up, my build configuration created, my web service bound in, to get to this point where I have a data-bound list view with a template that's ready to go. So what traditionally would take a long time as a developer, it's now been handled for me in just minutes with a few clicks in Screen Builder, really accelerating my progress in the project. So even if I want to do things that are custom, I now have a lot more time on my plate to go back and do those custom things that Screen Builder can't do for me. So it's a pretty cool feeling to get this far this fast. Now under the covers, Screen Builder is using a Yeoman generator, so it's a great extensibility point for our enterprise customers to go create a standard set of view templates if you really want to help your users stay on a uniform path, creating apps that conform to standards established within an organization. These templates are easy to create, and you can decide what properties to expose here in the Screen Builder property window I'm working with. A more advanced option for this view is this Master Detail option, where I can click Enable Details View, and I can say for the heading text of my Details view, I still want to show that last name, and for the description, maybe I want to show the notes for each employee. And when I do this, I'm going to see Screen Builder automatically create a second view for me that I can navigate from my data-bound list view. So now when I scroll through this list and click on an employee like this, I can see that nice mobile animation. An automatic back button navigation has been added, and I see the nodes field for my different employees. So an additional view, additional data binding, this time done with literally just a couple of clicks. So I'm feeling good about this. I'm feeling like my app is coming together. We had one more view we knew we needed to create, and that was the sign-in view. So I'll go add an additional view to my application, and we'll choose this authentication view type. I'm going to go ahead and make the name of this view a sign-in view title. Now, intelligently, you traditionally don't want a sign-in view in your navigation, so we're not going to include that as our template has suggested. Our data binding has already been set up, and as I mentioned, we're going to use the built-in user authentication provider in our Telerik Backend Services project. And we have a number of other options we can configure, like the text box label for our username or email, some help tip text. We can do that for all the various UI elements in our sign-in screen, as well as telling our sign-in screen where to send people once they've successfully authenticated. Now, we only have one other view in this app, so we'll send them to that view. And we can also provide a registration screen and link automatically, another automatically generated view that's created if we want to allow people to create new accounts when they interact with our application. So that's a great thing for us too. We'll click apply and we can see this view now generated, and in real time we interact with it in our application, and there we go. We can see we've got a sign-in view, a register view, which we can flip between, and we could even begin signing into and interacting with our application directly from the simulator here, but we'll do that in just a minute. So we can keep going through this process, building up these conceptual views. We can even control our application's navigation type if we had more views we wanted to manage, whether it's a tab-based navigation or drawer-based, and which view we want our application to show when it's initially loaded. And since we want some authentication to take place, we'll make that initial view the sign-in view. We could configure additional data providers, the theme for our application, but as you can see, it's a very fast and rapid way to scaffold the skeleton functionality of our application. And for a lot of simple applications, this is all you need. You could begin publishing out directly from here. We want to extend this though, and this is part of the beauty of the story of Screen Builder, is it's built on App Builder. It's built on a foundation that developers can trust, and it's built on code that developers can maintain. We know a lot of developers are very weary of visual design tools, so we've gone to great lengths to make sure what Screen Builder doesn't give you a bunch of garbage code that's terribly difficult to maintain. So as we can see here on the right, Screen Builder has already set up a folder project structure for me, and here's that default home view with the default view details, and then the master detail view also generated, and an index.js file that has all the model view information for this specific app view. And if I open this up, we can see the HTML is nice and clean, and MVVM syntax already in place here, along with UI binding templates. We're using Kendo UI Mobile here to help provide some of these out-of-the-box capabilities. So very easy to maintain and extend. In fact, maybe we're saying that for that first view where we have last name, we'd really prefer to show first name, last name. We couldn't do that easily from Screen Builder today. So I can come in here and modify this template, and I already know that first name is another available field, so I can say first name. And with just a little bit of modification here, I can now collaborate with anybody working in the Visual Screen Builder by adding additional capabilities in code and make my app a little bit more custom and functional. And once we've done this, we have the full power of App Builder available to us. All of the in-browser simulators we can run, like the Android, iPhone, Windows simulators. And to clarify the vocabulary, a simulator is an approximation of how your app will run, but it is running in a browser. The next best place to test your application is an emulator, like the iOS or Android emulators, and these will actually run versions of the mobile operating system on your computer, so you can see how your app will actually run in that mobile OS. And the best place to run your app before you deploy it out to users is, of course, on the metal, on a real device, so you can see how your application performs in that real environment. But a simulator and an emulator are great ways to find the quick, easy problems that you can fix before putting your app on a device. And we've got some great options here in the simulator, and I can begin logging into my application, and I've previously created an account, so I can do that quickly. I can sign in. Don't need to save that password, and when I do, here's my application. I can interact with it. I can navigate to employee views and make sure that it's functioning the way I expect it to. But what we'd really like to do at this point is sort of see our app on a device. And one of the neat things about a cloud-based infrastructure like Telerik Platform and App Builder is we can do that without any complex build steps or certification process by using something called the App Builder Companion Apps. These are apps available in the iOS, Android, Windows marketplaces, in their app stores, that you can download and install now. And with these companion apps, we can put our app we're working on our device instantly without the need to do any complex build or anything else. So I'm going to actually try to show you that on my physical device here. We've been given a QR code, which I should be able to scan on my device, which I will now mirror here on the screen. So here is my device. We'll put this over here. And I have the App Builder companion app already installed, which I'll launch here from the center of the screen. And if I do a two-finger swipe in this app, you can see I can pull out the little drawer in my App Builder companion app, and there's a QR scanner option right there in the app drawer. And if I tap on that, get a little QR camera, scan that code, and it's going to download now the content of my app and load it in this companion app, and I will instantly see what my app looks like now on real hardware. And there we go. Here's my app. I can begin interacting with it. Todd Anglin at Gmail, and we're using the email input type in HTML5, so we get these great keyboard shortcuts. Type in my super secure password and sign in. And there we go. This is data, again, I'll keep saying it because I'm always impressed myself that I can do this so fast. Data from a SQL server over a secure RESTful API in an application that's running on my actual iOS 6 device here. It's an iPhone 6 Plus and mirrored to the screen. Navigation's all there, all looking good. So a great little test to show how quickly we can get onto the device. Now we can go forward and do a lot more. So let's go back over to App Builder and figure out what we want to do next. So we said one of our requirements was that we want to create an app that runs on iOS and Android. So far we've seen it running on iOS. What if we want to see it running on Android? Well, we of course could do the exact same thing we've just done, launch this in the Android companion app, or we could even show it in the Android simulator. But just to show you the breadth of what you can do with the Telerik platform, I'd like to show this to you now running in an Android emulator. And the best way to collaborate with different environments, whether it's the browser-based tools we have here or maybe a Visual Studio plugin environment where you're working on your code, is of course over version control. We have complete built-in support for version control in App Builder. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this code to a remote repository, and I'm going to use my GitHub account to do that. So I've already put in my credentials, so we're already wired up, and I'm going to go ahead and call this Windy Data Demo, and we'll just leave the description blank for now. And I'll come in here and click Create to create my repository. And now we can see we've already selected that my Windy Data Demo is where I want to push this code I've just created in App Builder. And I'm going to go ahead and make myself the main collaborator, but I could invite others at this point. And when I click Done, this is going to automatically take all the code App Builder has created so far and put it in my GitHub repository. So we'll go ahead and say Done. So push that all out, and now we've got our code living in a Git repository and in GitHub. So take everything I've done so far and make sure it's in there. I'm just going to go ahead and commit all of my changes. So you can come in here and we get this great interactive view to see what's changed since our last commit. So I can go ahead and just say commit and push. I'll be a bad contributor and not add any useful comments for now, but now it's all out there in our GitHub repo. I can actually grab the URL for our GitHub repo now, which I'm going to do, just copy from this link. We're going to go over to that command line interface we opened up before when we got our development environment set up. So in here, first thing we need to do is bring our code into our local environment so that I can run it on a local Android emulator I have installed. So I'm going to go in here and say git clone that repository we just created. It's going to pull down all those assets, including anything we've configured in our project, to my local environment. Now that it's here, I can navigate to that folder, and within that folder, I can now start using the App Builder CLI. So we can actually navigate into our Windy Data app folder. And there's all of our code created by App Builder. And so if we want to emulate this, we will say App Builder emulate. And if I just stop there, I'm going to get some tips on how to use the emulate command. It shows I need to specify a platform, and there's some other options I have. And in the case of Android, I want to run this on the Genymotion Android emulator. It's a far faster version of the default Android emulator and a much better debugging experience than working with the default Android emulator as well. We provide built-in integration with Genymotion, so it's easy to use. The only thing you need to use it successfully is the name of a virtual device you've configured within the Genymotion emulator setup. So I'm going to use their own command line tools called Geny Shell. I'm going to fire that off to get a list of the virtual devices I've created. So I can say devices list, and here are my virtual Genymotion devices, and I've got one that's running Android 5 here. I'm just going to copy and paste this name. This is a good PSA to remind you that shorter device names can be better. I should probably shorten these device names up to make it easier to remember. So we can go back to the App Builder CLI now and say App Builder emulate Android. And because we want to use the Jenny Motion emulator, we'll say --Jenny and then provide that name of the device we want to run on. So I'll go ahead and hit enter. And what this will do now for my local environment is take all of my code from my application, upload it to the Telerik platform build servers, build my Android application, create the APK, download it once it's done, and then automatically launch and run that in an Android emulator. So we can see our application running on actual Android OS. When this is complete, we will have now, in just the minutes we've been together, created a cross-platform app that's running on iOS and on Android, and we'll have put it on the actual operating system, one case on the Metal and the other case on the emulator, without doing any configuration or environment setup. It's all here ready for us, ready to go, and it's taking us no time at all. So let this load up. Now, as this loads up, let's start thinking about the next thing we need to do, because we have already gone iOS, Android. We're connecting to our legacy Northwind data. We also said we need to do something native. So once this thing loads up, we need to go back to our App Builder project and figure out what is that native thing we can do to demonstrate that what we're doing today deserves to be an app and not just a website. So here we are in the Android emulator that Jenny Motion provides. Loads up so much faster than the default Android emulator. And there's our sign-in view. So here's our application running on Android. We could sign in on Android just as we did on iOS, just to demonstrate completeness. And we sign in, we get the same complete functional application here as well. So there we go. We're off to the races. So let's figure out what is that native thing we can do in our application that we can show today in the webcast. Now, when we talk about doing native in a hybrid application, that means a plugin. Plugins are where you have the ability to interact with native device APIs and hybrid apps. And you can manage the plugins in your application in App Builder via the Properties screen. In fact, you can manage a lot of things about your application from the Properties screen, like your application identifier. This is very important, particularly when you're doing apps for iOS, because you need a signing certificate that matches your app identifier. So I'll go ahead and put mine in there. And you can configure a lot of other things in here as well, like whether or not you want to allow portrait and landscape orientation for your app. What the icons and splash screens of your app need to be for each target platform, permissions you want to request, devices you want to support. All of that can be quickly configured here in the Properties screen. Then, of course, down at the bottom, there's plugins. We provide a lot of plugins out of the box that you can simply check a box and enable. These are default common Cordova plugins. You can also import your own custom plugins if you have your own. If we scroll down here far enough, we'll see another option called Install from Plugins Marketplace. And what that's referring to is the verified plugins marketplace that we've curated over the last year or so, where we have worked hard to make sure that the plugins we curate are tested, documented, and guaranteed to work when you import them into your hybrid project. Today we feature plugins for Apache Cordova, and of course soon we'll also have plugins for NativeScript as well. So if we go into the Cordova plugins marketplace, we can see that there are now almost 60 different plugins in here, again, all documented. And unlike the Wild West of just random repos of plugins, these things we've worked on to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do. So since I can't show you a flashlight or something else on the hardware over a webcast today, we need to do something that can be shown on the screen, and the action sheet is as good as any plugin to make that happen. So when I click on a plugin in the marketplace, you can see I get all kinds of useful information, documentation, code snippets, how to use the plugin, as well as screenshots showing me how that plugin should look when I load it up on my device and get it going. I even have quick shortcuts here to load that plugin up in App Builder or use it in the Cordova CLI or the App Builder CLI. Again, marketplaces for any Cordova developer. But remember that button in App Builder, Install from Marketplace. We can actually do this without ever leaving the App Builder interface to add these plugins to our app. So when I click that button, you can see I get an interface here, which not only allows me to load in Bower packages and Kenda UI framework versions, I can load any plugin from that marketplace. I can search for it, but here I see it right on top. So I can select that and go ahead and just click Install. This will now import everything necessary to make this plugin part of my application. So the only thing that's left for me to do is actually implement or use that plugin in some part of my app. So we can go ahead now and go back to find a place where we can invoke that native plugin. The simplest way to do that, I think, is just to create a button somewhere in our app that we can click to show that action sheet native element. And so on our authentication view HTML, let's just go ahead and add an additional button to do that. So I'll copy one of our existing buttons we already have and paste in another copy of it here. And rather than binding to the authentication view model toggle view event, we'll go ahead and bind to some new event we need to create, a new action handler called action sheet. And we'll change the text of our button from register to action sheet. So now we have a way of invoking our action sheet, and in our code for this view, we need to modify our view model, which again was all created for us automatically by Screen Builder when we initially set up our application. So I'm not the best developer in the world, I'll admit to that. This has already helped me create better code than I would have on my own by giving me some best practices as it set up my application. So we see our function for sign in, for register. Let's go ahead and create one for action sheet. And we'll go ahead and create our anonymous function here. And now, in classic copy and paste development form, we'll go back over to the marketplace where we originally reviewed the documentation for this and just take this snippet documentation they've created, the code snippet, to help us implement this in our demo. Let's paste this into our demo, and we can see what this does is it provides some configuration of the options the action sheet requires, basic text and prompts, and then provides those options or passes those options into a call to window.plugins, gets us into the hybrid plugins namespace, actionsheet.show. The only thing that it also requires is some kind of callback that gets called once you've clicked a button in that action sheet. We'll go ahead and just provide a dummy inline function for now rather than creating a standalone callback function. And we'll simply alert whatever index it is that someone has clicked. So we'll say index, and then we'll simply display the index of the clicked action sheet button. There we go. So now we've implemented the call to our plugin, but now that we have a custom plugin in our application, the companion app really isn't going to be sufficient because the companion app obviously doesn't have all these plugins baked in. So we now need to create a complete build of our application. So for the sake of completeness, I'm going to go ahead and commit these changes to our source control. I'll just go ahead and commit and push so that it's also available in our remote repository on GitHub. And then in my project, I'm going to go up here and say run and build. I'm going to go ahead and build an actual complete app package for iOS. And since I'm building for iOS now, once we go to a full build, we need to have our signing certificate from Apple available, along with the device identifiers for the devices we're allowed to install these apps on, per Apple's rules for how we install install apps on devices. Some of this is changing now with iOS 9 and some of the new Apple programs, so hopefully this will continue to get simpler, but for now we need this signing certificate. So I'll go ahead and click Next. And now this build is running in the cloud. So I'm about to get a complete iOS build for my app, and when it's done, I'm going to get a QR code I can scan and directly install this app on my device because it's part of that list of device IDs without needing to connect anything over USB or do anything else. I'm just going to get that app I can install on my device. While that's running, let's go ahead and download the latest code we've got in our project locally by doing a GitHub update or a Git update. We'll just simply say git pull, get the latest version of our object with that new plugin we've just added. Let's go ahead and also do a build for Android. So we can come in here and emulate again. And when we do an emulation, it's going to go ahead and do a rebuild of our app in the cloud. So we'll just kick that off and let that start running as well. So we can see how this plugin looks natively both in iOS and in Android, further verifying we've done all the right things. So our build for iOS is just about complete. So let me go ahead and open up my reflected view of my app for you again. So bring this up on screen. There we go. Move this over. So let's go now ahead and open up a generic QR scanner to scan the code we've been given here. This is not for a companion app. And when I tap this link that this refers to, I'm going to get a prompt to install my Windy Data app. I'll go ahead and click Install and Done. And now we should see that my app is being installed on my device screen. We see it in the bottom right there. There it is, installing. And we tap on that. Our app loads right up on iOS. And there's our new Action Sheet button, which is invoking our new plugin for a native capability. So we can tap that. And there it is. There's our native iOS Action Sheet loaded up with completely irrelevant text because we did not modify the copy-paste snippet. But we see it functioning in our iOS app. So that's great. We're doing good so far. Let's see if the same thing works in Android. Oh, there's our index alert in the Android Genymotion emulator. So we'll go over to Genymotion again. Let's see where we're at in the build process here. See if we got this all loaded up. we may have a cached version of our application loaded here because we did not close the emulator. So we may have to run this again. So we'll just let that close, and we'll run this again in the background. And we'll come back and check in a minute to make sure that what we did for iOS also works for Android. But so far, I think we've met our core requirements. We've built an app that runs on iOS and Android. We've done something native. We're also connecting to legacy data, pulling it out of SQL Server and Northwind and connecting to our app.